hear you.
Well, we can see you, and that's all that's important.
Okay.
So, okay, so it's selective law enforcement. Bill O'Reilly said it earlier tonight in his talking points that it seems like politicians are more concerned with their political ideology than the safety of the American people. In your book, there's a term that you use. It's called misprision. Never heard of that word until I read your book. The definition, roughly, basically is and it has mostly to do with people in authority, people in power, elected officials, law enforcement. You know, basically somebody who's supposed to keep law and order and observe the constitutional oath that they take. That if somebody is willfully and knowingly defying that oath and willfully and knowingly disobeying the law or making the law and then, you know, saying only the American people have to follow this, we don't as elected people. And then if other senators, councilmen, whatever level of government, if there's other people in that level of government and they know that this is going on and they see that it's going on and then they do nothing about it, they have committed an act of misprision. They're knowingly and willfully not only disobeying their law, but willfully and knowingly not doing anything to basically rat somebody out, which is what they're supposed to be doing. This is what's happening, isn't it, sir? Let's look at the San Francisco City Council. Let's look at our federal government. You just said selective law enforcement. Go ahead, sir.
Well, usually misprision is used in terms of treason.
It's an act of treason,
the
sir.
word treason fits here pretty well in many cases. But the idea is the term misprision may be a strange legal term for people, but we see the concept played out in real life law enforcement every day. It's called obstruction of justice. And if you see a crime committed, like a burglary or a rape or whatever, if you see a crime committed and you do not come forward to report that crime, then and if later they find out that you had knowledge of the crime but you said nothing about it in the process, you could be charged with a very serious crime.
Sure.
In many cases, a felony for not having opened your mouth. And even worse, if you witnessed a crime and the police ask you about it and you lied about it, that's worse. Now you got perjury on top of it.
Exactly true.
But this is the concept of misprision. When you see something that you know is a violation of constitutional law or federal law, and you do nothing to report it, to raise the flag on it, whatever,
Sure.
then you are guilty of a crime, as you should be.
Exactly. And but again, this seems to be what's going on. Bill O'Reilly said they're more interested in their political ideology, protecting their own butts in their own seats of whatever power, government, whatever level that they're in, rather than the safety of the American people. And it's, again, I was talking to Mark David Shaw the other night on the show. Great theologian. He did a great 14-part series on Saul Alinsky. Talked all about the history of Saul Alinsky. Absolutely great guy. And I had mentioned to him that a few years ago, when I first started the show and first started really getting into political theory and political science and basically getting involved with, what I do today, that I had thought to myself, we're reaching critical mass. I mean, things are getting out of hand, political correctness is out of hand, the left is taking over. You wrote a great book, Trilateral Commission's taking over, we're moving towards one world government. We're losing our sovereignty. We're reaching critical mass. I'm thinking, it's getting close. It's getting close. I was talking to Mark David Shaw the other night, and I said to him, "Sir, I am now changing my opinion." He's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I think we're in free fall. We're off the cliff. The singularity has already been met. We're off the cliff. We're in free fall. Just watch the news. When you and I were young kids, once in a great while, we interrupt this program for a special announcement. You knew that something had gone wrong. That something had happened. Now, today, I don't know if it's because of our 24-hour news network, every day there's some new whacked out thing going on, and the politicians react to it. Al Sharpton immediately went to Baltimore to stir up more trouble. Immediately went to Ferguson to stir up more trouble. The whole thing in Charleston, immediately it turned into the Confederate flag, whereas a week ago, nobody gave a crap about that. Take it from here, sir.
That's right. It's a massive diversion from what's really happening in our country. It's indescribable. It leaves you speechless to think how stupid this is. For instance, the whole flap over the Confederate flag. For what?
Nikki Haley signed that. She went in. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you had. I have to say this. Nikki Haley went in under the banner as a Republican, grassroots candidate, and a Tea Party person. This is what really burns my brisket. And then she turns around and does this. I mean, now, I'm sorry, she's a turncoat. My son used that term. She's a turncoat. She's a coward, and I think she needs to be removed from office. Again, this is another act of treason and misprision. This is how I'm seeing it. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Well, when you really have somebody pinned down to the fact that they witnessed something that is illegal or very probably illegal, if you serve them with a misprision of treason notice, it doesn't have any legal teeth to it per se. But
really?
The idea is that when as and if it's proven that an illegal act took place, that they have been served and that they will be liable for potential criminal action when the thing does get to court. And of course, a citizen delivering a misprision of treason isn't documenting that a crime has been committed. That's what the courts are for. But it merely puts, if you will, puts the fear of God into the politicians and say, look, man, we're serious about this. When as and if it's ever determined that a crime has been committed here, we're holding your feet to the fire, and you're going to go right along with them. Now, you can think, for instance, in terms of Hillary Clinton and Benghazi, and all the people that surrounded Hillary Clinton in the Benghazi debacle, including people like Susan Rice and the other national security advisors that lied through their teeth during that whole process.
Exactly.
Well, you would like to go and serve every one of those people with a misprision of treason document and say, okay, when as and if this ever goes to court, let's say that somehow miraculously Hillary Clinton got taken to court on this and that it was determined that she committed a crime. Well, all the other people that you served with a misprision of notice are now liable to get drug into court and just wrapped into her suit, into her criminal action, as they should be. The whole lot of them should go along with her.
Why, sir? Why does this not happen? Why do we not have more chutzpah, more, I'm going to say it's my show, more balls to just go and round these people up?
Well, look, this is the way I see it, Chris. This may be kind of an unpopular, thought, but this is the way I see it, and I just tell it like I see it, I guess. You cannot defeat an enemy you don't know. In other words, if you don't know who the enemy is, how can you possibly defeat him? And you see, you've read enough of my book, if not the whole thing.
I did read the whole thing. It's amazing. My buddy's reading it now, too.
Well, you know that the enemy has not been clearly defined, and so it's no wonder that we've been unsuccessful for the last 40 years. I mean, I've been doing stuff over time, and I know lots of people that have fought very hard for the Republic and trying to turn things around. And you know what? For all their effort and their good intentions, we're worse off today than we've ever been in the history of our nation. That only proves that we've been fighting the wrong enemy.
Oh, yeah.
That has to stop. It has to stop. We need to identify the enemy for who he is and turn our strategy around to focus on defeating that enemy, not somebody else we think is the enemy that's, basically a fantasy. That's just my take on it.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. I while you were talking there, I thought about the stuff that you discussed with me before the last time we spoke, about how you had to research the book. You had to go all the way to Canada to find these documents hidden away in some obscure library somewhere. And I while you were talking, I'm thinking, it's like this is, you were thinking in terms probably of, oh, I know who the enemy is. I know what I want to research. I want to find this. And then you suddenly realize I got to go to Canada. That was probably a wake-up call for you. It's like, wait a minute, I myself, Patrick Wood, I'm looking in the wrong direction here. I've got to start rethinking how I'm going to go about doing this.
That's right. And even then, even when I went to do the research, I was, so to speak, on the hunt, right? I was like the hound, chasing the fox, and
Right.
I didn't know if I was going to catch the fox or not. But when I went up there, I had a good idea of some of the stuff I'd find, but I really had no deep idea, the total impact it would have on me and my thinking.
Right.
But after I got done with it, Chris, I came back and I went through Zbigniew Brzezinski's book again that he wrote in 1970 called Between Two Ages. The subtitle, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. And remember, Brzezinski is one of the co-founders of the Trilateral Commission in 1973. I reread his book with the idea, thinking that what I remembered about it sounded an awful lot like what I discovered up in Canada.
Right. Right.
And I thought, well, I know it doesn't use exactly the same terminology, but maybe he was seeing the same stuff. And technocracy originally started at Columbia University.
Yes.
That was unmistakable. That's history. And we find Brzezinski writing his book in 1970, was only, 35 years later. We find Brzezinski at Columbia University as a political science professor writing this book called about the technotronic era. And lo and behold, the policies and thoughts and the patterns in his book mimic early technocracy. And it was that point that I really realized that this was where I needed to be. This is where the focus needed to be. That these people had intended from the get-go, from day one in 1973, to implement historic technocracy throughout the world for the sake of creating a new international economic order that would look nothing like the one we had before, and indeed would be a brand new economic order based on technocracy, which is an energy-based system instead of a supply and demand-based economic system. It became really clear to me at that point what their strategy was. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I'm still so excited about this. And I don't say excited like, oh, whoop-de-doo, I'm selling 10 books or whatever. I'm excited about it because this thing's driving me nuts. Our country needs to see who the enemies really are.
And we must not be afraid to call it out as such. I have a saying like
That's
that.
right.
We must see things as they really are. Look at Donald Trump. He's getting a lot of crap for what he said. Hey, you might like him, you might not like him. You might agree, you might disagree with how he said it or what he said. But God damn it, he's right on, because all the news is coming out, the stories are coming out. He's pointing back and he's saying, see, I'm correct. What I said is correct. Again, you've got to stop looking at the smoke. It's the man behind the curtain.
That's right. That's exactly right. And some people are getting it now. They're finally starting to really see how the pieces connect.
Right.
And it's interesting that the Pope recently released his encyclical on climate change. This was a long-awaited document that he announced, I think, 4 or 5 months ago. And as it was produced, oddly enough, he talks about technocracy within his encyclical. He mentions the word 3 times, technocracy. He talks about the technocratic paradigm. And what's really interesting is that his use of the word technocracy is absolutely 180 degrees out of sync with reality.
Right.
He uses it in a way that is completely at odds with the way I'm using it in the book Technocracy Rising. And so all of a sudden we have this major public document being released that instantly becomes a major source of misinformation and disinformation, and with the intent of confusing people as to what technocracy really means.
And because it's an encyclical, that becomes now the de facto mantra. That's what an encyclical is for the Catholics and other, Christian believing people. That once this encyclical, it's kind of like an affirmation handed down from on high. And what you just said, it's completely 180 degrees opposite. So, instantaneously, we're already going off of a false narrative.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
That's exactly right.
I want to take a quick break. Let's move right into the Olympics. I've actually got to solve one small technical problem. Nothing on your end. We'll be right back with Patrick Wood. Hang on, Patrick.